So in this section, what we're going to deal with messaging. Messaging is really, really important as you capture those leads from those landing pages that we discussed in this last section. And as you try to move them through the funnel and turn them into converting users, messaging, and very specifically email, is a really powerful channel when implemented correctly. So let's get into some of the tactics and strategies you can use to bring your marketing funnel up a notch. So why is messaging so important? How do you learn about a product? How do people come back to your product? And how do they learn about your features? If you've gotten someone to take action on your landing page, you've done a great job of engaging them this far. But people visit hundreds of websites weekly. And so trying to stand out and trying to stay on top of people's frame of mind, so when they're ready to purchase, you're the first thing they think of, is really, really difficult without a successful messaging strategy. The same applies whether you're a website or service or an app. Even with apps, 90% of smartphone users' time is spent on just 18 apps, and they include the core functionalities like messaging, calls, and emails. So it's really hard to break through and make yourself resonant and make yourself important to someone without constantly being able to communicate back and forth with them. And messaging happens between every step. As soon as someone comes into your ecosystem, you should be messaging to try and move them through your pathway, whether their first step is getting them to download that ebook or webinar, whether it's to get them to engage with your free trial or to get them engaged with your product, whether you want them to reply to you even after they purchase, trying to get them to continue to purchase, get them to engage and respond. Messaging never stops once someone enters your sphere, and implementing it productively can make a huge difference in terms of getting converting users. And so what we're going to talk about very specifically is email. There's obviously, if you work in the app space, there's push notifications and in-app messages. And obviously there's a whole ecosystem in terms of direct mail and items such as this. But we're going to concentrate on email because it applies to pretty much every business if you work in the digital sphere, and is a great place to start if you're not sure where to start with your messaging strategy. Why is email important? Email is important. It may not feel as important as it has in the past, and some people may see it as not a very attractive marketing channel, but it is an owned channel, which is incredibly powerful in this day and age. With the privacy introductions on a lot of the social platforms, email is the one place where you know your user and you can start to collect some of that important behavioral usage that they have and really use it to supplement and create this two-way dynamic where they can talk to you and you can talk directly to them. It's also been proven by the numbers in mostly recent research. Every dollar spent on email can lead to a $42 return on investment. That's incredibly powerful. And again, helps you to build that direct one-to-one connection with your customer and build that relationship over time. It is not like posting a tweet. It is not about seeing seen somewhere. With email, you can constantly bring them back to you and your product. And that's why it's so, so important. And what are the metrics you should look out for? Before you send any email, these are the types of metrics that you should keep an eye on to see if your messaging is successful or not. It's super important to send messaging with a clear purpose and a clear goal so that you're not starting to annoy your users with messaging that doesn't make sense or doesn't resonate with them. I have on this bullet point open rate kind of. Open rate used to be hugely important because it was the indicator of whether someone ever even got to read your email. And so testing on subject lines, preview text, and even sometimes sender emails was really, really important because you wanted to keep that open rate really, really high. Previously, I would have said anything below 15% open rate was a real cause for concern and something that should be worked on and improved. That obviously differs by industry. However, in the last couple of months with the introduction of iOS 15, if you are using Apple Mail or if your users are using Apple Mail, their open rates are going to be overly inflated because what that has done is that Apple is automatically opening those emails so that email sending providers cannot identify whether someone did or did not send that email. It's taken away a real tool for email marketers in the sense of open rates were used to help segment engaged audiences from non-engaged audience and was another basis in which you could test. Having said that, the implementation of iOS 15 has been on Apple Mail thus far, and it has been relatively limited. So if you can identify those users who are using Apple Mail to open your emails, you may be able to gauge roughly what your open rate is from that outside sphere, but I would not depend on it with any great degree of confidence. If it's still below that 15%, definitely keep an eye on it, even with those inflated numbers, because what actually should be happening is your open rates should have risen as a result of this. So if they're still on the lower end, definitely continue to test and iterate upon those core items like subject lines, but know that your metrics may not be even 50 to 60% correct at the moment. Because of that, click-through rates have become so much more important. They were always really, really important for an email, but this is how you gauge whether your body copy and the rest of your email and your call to action really resonated. A CTR is a click-through rate, and so what you want from an email is for someone to read your email and take an action based on that. What I would be looking at for a baseline there is you want to be getting at least a 1% click-through rate to show not only that your content is resonating with your users, but also to show the inbox providers that this email deserves to be in someone's inbox and deserves to be placed in a place that they can see it because they are engaging with the content. 1% would be on the lower end. Anything below that, I would revisit that marketing strategy behind it, but you should be at least looking to do that and definitely push that higher and higher. Obviously, the goal with email should be to drive a conversion, whether that's a landing page visit, whether that's to go to a further asset, whether it's to go to a free trial, a demo, a blog post, or a reviews page. Having that clear conversion rate in mind will help you to judge the success or failure of your email and allow you to test further things within your email content to try build upon that. And then lastly, response rate. It's not a commonly watched one for email sending providers, but can be really, really important as you try to prove your deliverability to these inboxes. And so a response rate is really common to introduce in the first email or two, and it'll usually be phrased along the lines of, do you have any questions on this topic? Or for example, if you send a lead magnet, it could be, I'm making something similar to this. Let me know your thoughts on what you'd like included in it. That really, really sends a very strong signal to Gmail that this is a two-way conversation. This person isn't being spammed at. They're engaging with this content. Make sure it's placed high on their inbox. So if you can introduce some of that type of messaging into it, those replies, are valuable sources of user feedback, but also can help in terms of your overall email deliverability. So now you know what metrics are important. The next thing you're going to look at is starting to set up your messaging. And the first thing you need to do that is a messaging platform in which to send it. What I have on this slide here is a bunch of the options that are there. And there's probably tens, if not hundreds more out there. Each one of them has their individual strengths and individual weaknesses, but it can be quite difficult, particularly if you're not familiar with any of them, first and foremost, to decide which one is the right fit for you. And so here's a couple of the considerations I would have in mind as you start to look at and compare platforms. The first one, and it's an obvious one, is budget. You need to be able to afford the platform you decide to use. And so what you'll want to see is what their plans are, what their pricing model is. So for example, some of them will charge based on how many subscribers you have on your list, which is great as you start off because you may have a smaller email list, so it might be quite cheap initially, but you will want to probably look at that at least over a year period of like, where do I expect to get? Does that scale with me as I grow? Or you may want to look at a more package set that it's this month or a year, kind of regardless. You maybe opt in and out of particular feature sets within that. So those are considerations to keep in mind, is how much are you comfortable spending and does that scale with you at least over a limited period of time? The next one is experience. And what I mean by experience is your experience using a messaging platform. If you've someone, you yourself or someone in your marketing department that's going to be in charge of this, what you'll want to see if they've experience with a platform, that can be really, really valuable because there's not that learning cost associated with it. And it'll allow you to get to the more detailed messaging sequences and segmentations because they'll have that. Again, if you're new to email marketing and you're new to email sending providers, getting a platform that's really intuitive, really easy to use may be a better first step so that you can just get yourself rolling and there's not this lag in time of trying to learn the platform. Another thing to look at is feature set. Even within email marketing itself, there can be a lot of different niche subsets of features that you may or may not want. For example, you may want to be able to set up automations autonomously. You may want to have very detailed segmentation. You may want to be able to load dynamic product recommendations. You may want to be able to load a lot of subscription information. All of these types of things are worth keeping in mind. Again, if you're starting this from scratch, what is the basics that you need to know to be able to really deliver good messaging to your users, and start with that. But it's no harm to make a list of the things that you'll want to be able to send emails from based on the triggers, the things that they'll do that you'll want to set messages off from, the types of things you'll want to be able to do, and maybe some things that you don't need it to do because other platforms are handling that for you. Again, this next point relates to experience, but HTML versus drag and drop. Most of these email providers that I had on the previous screen implement a drag and drop type functionality. So you don't need to be experienced in email developing and email coding to be able to put together really nice emails. Again, if someone on your team is in charge of this and they're able to, if they want to, and if they're able to do HTML coding, that's something that you may not need to regard as much, but it's really handy, particularly at a startup level when you may have multiple people contributing and maybe no one who's perfectly specialized in this, to have a drag and drop editor, as it makes it a lot quicker to be able to get messaging out quickly. Support, again, based on your experience, this may be more or less important, but having a good support mechanism within your email sending provider can be really helpful as you try to get through those early sticking points, whether it's domain verification, making sure your deliverability is okay. If you want to build something particularly complex, having a resource on hand that you can ask those questions to can be helpful. Again, decide within your own startup how much of a preference you want to put on that. Additional products, a lot of the ones I showed on the previous screens do not just do email, which is kind of a beauty in a lot of these products. So particularly the intercoms and the HubSpots, you can build your landing pages, you can do your customer support through them, you can do your CRM through them, you can set up forms through them, you can host assets on it, you can do a load of these types of things. So if you're already using those platforms, it can be a great idea to just utilize the messaging system that's also built into that. That way you keep everything unified. You're not adding something else to your tech stack. Or if you're looking to have some of those features, so for example, with ConvertKit, they also do landing pages and forms, and you can set up products individually within there if you want to test it. It's a nice additional nice to have there as you start to set up your messaging, but you should probably decide relatively early on what are need to haves and what are nice to not haves, whether you want to adopt something that you're using for something else. So you may use HubSpot for landing pages. Do you want to use that for email? And see if other platforms you're currently using help to support that or not. And then lastly, integrations. Tech stacks are getting more and more complex. And as we usually recommend people to try to keep it as simple as possible, but you'll likely want to be able to get your email sending platform to integrate with other tools you're using, whether you're using WordPress to host your site, whether you're using data analytics, whether you're using a CRM behind the scenes, or you have your own database. Being able to plug certain things into your email sending platform can be really important. So having integrations that are pre-built or using tools like a Zapier to do it is another consideration to keep in mind as you pick your ESP. And so next, what we're going to talk about is just a little bit of email best practices. Again, we're going to cover a very niche set of messaging today, purely based on this program. But these are things that you can apply regardless of the types of emails you send, and also work equally well with your in-app and push messages. Send from a person. And what I mean by that is when you set a name on the email that you're using to send your emails, set it as a person. People like to be talk to people. It makes it much more likely that someone's going to open an email. So using something like Aoife from Growth University means that you know who it is and you know the company it's from. So before you even click on that email, you have an idea of what it's going to be about, or at least where it's coming from, which is really important with email. You want to keep that trust as high as possible. The second point is talk like a person. Again, you can do some testing on this because it can differ a little bit by industry. But having an email that sounds like a person is much more likely to resonate with a person. Similar to landing pages, you don't want to sound artificial. You want someone to resonate with what you're saying and take action on what you're saying and not sound like a robot or maybe overly corporate. Again, depending on your industry. For example, if I'm a bank, I may not want to have too much personality in that email because I may want people to take an important security action, and actually that could distract from it. But for a lot of industries, talking like a person, resonating with your audience is really important. Your subject line. Subject lines, again, as we were talked about earlier, open rates are really hard to gauge at the moment, but your subject line is somewhere that you should still continue to test to see if you can at least incrementally notice a difference in the open rates that you're seeing outside of the Apple Mail. If no one opens your email, they will never see your content. And so all the rest of the work that you do becomes irrelevant. So your subject line is somewhere that you should really entice someone in. It should invoke some sort of curiosity. It should give them a very clear goal or clear value within it. It should give them something of value. It should be something that when you see it, they have no choice but to click to it. And so humor works really well. Offers work really well. Giving listicles tends to work quite well. What you'll want to avoid is stuff that seems overly spammy or overly corporate, that there's no real interest in me opening it because I, A, know what it is and have no interest in it, or B, have no idea what it is and I don't resonate with it. So again, subject lines are somewhere to put a bit of time in, even though it's harder to really see the difference testing can make there. Personalizing and segmentation. As much as you can do this, you should try to. So in our instance, where we've come from our landing page, they've downloaded an asset or they've signed up for a webinar, you now have a pre-made segment, and you should try to materialize that into your ESP. So if I came in for a sales webinar, I should be part of the sales webinar segment, so that when future webinars come up about sales, I can be prompted on that, or as I'm building out my nurture sequence that we'll get into next, it's very based on the fact that that's where I came from. So you can continue to send me content because I've already shown an interest in that type of content. Again, within the email itself, then you can personalize it around, maybe there was something as part of that webinar that I can call back out again. Maybe there's something in my industry that you were able to collect on that sign-up form that you can add into there. Again, personalization doesn't just start with your name, and anything you can do to make it more resonate with your audience, the better. Always establish your goal. You shouldn't send an email for the sake of sending an email. There should always be a really clear goals associated with it, so that you, as the email marketer, can measure the success or failure of that email, but also as the end user, that they can tell within the email that there is something they should do or something they should know. When that's missing, the people tend not to resonate with the emails, and it's hard to establish whether an email works. So even if it's a quick thing of, my goal of this email is to get people to get onto this landing page, that can be setting that up front means that you can establish a success or failure on it, and you can test and try to incrementally or substantially increase that. Always double check. This applies to everything from who you're sending it to, the spelling in your subject line, the verbiage of your body copy, your sign off. All of those types of things should be double checked prior to sending it to your audience. There's nothing worse as an email marketer than accidentally sending an email to your entire list because you forgot to put in your segmentation, or sending an irrelevant email to people who, for example, saying thank you for taking our trial if they didn't take our trial. So you always want to make sure that everything is nailed out before you get to it, because it can be hard to rebuild the trust if you break it within an email. Comply with spam laws. This one is super, super important. The rest of those are things that the points I talk about are more based on testing, and you'll be able to establish some of that yourself. But so complying with the spam laws is really important and a legal obligation. I won't talk too much about it. You should check out the relevant resources on that. But what I mean by that is, if someone asks you to stop sending, you should stop sending. You should never buy lists. Not only is it not legal, it also is really bad practice and won't get you any results. And you should be careful with people's private information, as you should, regardless of whether you're using it to email them or not. And so, particularly if you're based in Europe, GDPR is absolutely essential to look into. If you're operating in the US space, the CCPA, and there's a bunch of other regulations across the board, can spam, for example. So you should keep an eye on those, make sure you're corresponding with those so you don't land yourself in business trouble by not following those. And so what we're going to talk about very specifically is lead nurturing emails. There's a bunch of email sequences that you can send and you can set up, and really advanced automations you can do. But because the point of this program is to try to get you at the whole way to customer, lead nurturing emails is the place in which you pick them up after landing page and try to drive them down funnel. So that's what we're going to dive in today. As I mentioned, all of the stuff within this is based on good practices and good to-dos, but everything should be tested. And so this will just give you an idea of where to start. But you should definitely add your own spin on this, as industry and business specific things will cause a change in behavior for these. So with the lead nurturing series, it kind of says what it does in the change. What you want to do is nurture that lead, make them feel comfortable, make sure they are educated on your product, show that you deliver value and that you are a solution to a very real problem. It will be the first thing they get. Those initial emails that people get are the most important in terms of they garner the most open rates, the most click-through rates, and most of the time garner the most sales. So getting this right can be really, really impactful for your business. With a lead nurturing email, you've usually gained it from something like a webinar, a downloader, newsletter, sign up. So ensuring you have that message match is also really important. If someone came in through a webinar, you do not want those initial emails to be thank you for taking our trial. It's very different. Even with the branding, you'll want as much as possible to try to continue to bring that in, because the entire funnel should feel like a flow and not stunted in any way. And so we're going to go through a couple of emails. You can make it shorter or longer, but these are some of the core things that I try to look at when I talk about lead nurturing. So your very first email, what should be in that very first email? Who you are. It sounds counterintuitive, and you may have set up your sender email to say, your EFA from Growth University, but it's no harm to reiterate that somewhere within the email so it becomes very clear who you are. So, hey, John here from Growth Company. Even something as simple as that, it helps to continue to build that confidence. Thanks for downloading our free guide on how to get more sales. It tells people why they are getting this. Just because someone signed up for your list does not mean they will remember they signed up for your list. And the last thing you want to do is to get into trouble because someone reports of saying, I never signed up for this. Reiterating why they got it is really, really important to help continue to build that trust. Usually what I'll do, particularly if it's something like a downloadable asset, is I will re-include it in that very first email so they have it on hand if they weren't automatically emailed that before. And then you'll want to talk about what you do. Very briefly, this is not a place for you to overly hyperbole, but you want to say, here at Growth University, for example, we help startups grow. We do that by providing training courses and a selection of options so that we can help your startup grow as quickly as possible. It's quick, it's to the point, it gets across what you want, what you do so that they're fully in the knowledge after this first email of who you are and why you were talking to them. What I usually like to do with that email one is something of value. So you may add back in that asset, which can be really good, or maybe it's a new asset. I really hope you enjoyed that sales ebook, for example. You might be interested in this on-demand webinar we offer. Again, it's something of value. It's an easy ask. People will be incentivized to do it because you've made it segmented. And it also proves to the email providers and the email inboxes that your email is of value. People are clicking on this thing. I should continue to send more of this. And then lastly, a nice thing to have in that email too is when you'll be in touch. It sets a precedent and sets a behavioral expectation that I will hear from them again. So we'll be in touch over the next few days with some other top tips on sales. Is really, really good. It just sets that little thing in someone's mind that if I see another email, I'm expecting it. They've already told me about it. It's not going to be unintroduced. And so this is an example from Boastable. Again, the emails I'll show as examples come from kind of different industries and different things. So in this one, they give a discount code up front, but they say, thanks for giving us your email. Immediately I know who it is. You can see the very big logo at the top, but I know it's from Boastable, as promised. Again, continue to bring that value that they had in their landing page. Use code email for 20% off your first card and then send the card. The welcome to the neighborhood, it visualizes what Post will do, so I know exactly what it does. And there was a little bit of extra that didn't make it onto the screen for this email, but quickly I know what it is. Again, they're giving me a code as my value and they're asking me to go and do my first purchase. Again, it's a lower price option, so this works well for them in this instance. But immediately I know who it is, why I'm getting it, I'm getting value, and I can see what it is. Email 2. So email 2 is usually where I would advise getting into the problem. If someone has downloaded a sales ebook, it's likely it's because they want to help with their sales process. And so you can identify that based on where they came from. And then what you'll want to do is how you can help to solve it. Again, with this, I'll try to get in another interaction point. So whether it be another asset, a blog post, a video, anything at all that'll get them to interact. And again, adding another value point. If you can show that you can continue to provide value, you're giving and giving. And so when the time comes to ask for something, the purchase, the conversion event you're looking for, they trust that you're able to give value and they can see value and that they will expect more value off the back of that. And so this one is from Freelancer. Again, the visual in this is really, really nice. If you can do visuals, that's great within your emails. A lot of text by itself also works really well. I'd advise testing both. But what this visual does really well is it shows the problem and it shows the solution really, really clearly up front. And it also gets into the text. And it even starts with, I'm willing to bet you've had this problem before. And it starts to talk about the problem. Introducing the problem, it creates an emotional reaction in someone, whether it's up front or if it's a little bit more underlying. But when you can pose yourself as the solution, you start to build that relationship. And so I think it's really strong here because it gets across straight away the problem, the solution, and why it's Freelancer. Email 3, again, depending on your flow and how long you want it to be, you might come in with a harder sell here. But what I usually like to do in a medium-sized sequence is introduce social proof at this stage if you haven't already. And a lot of emails work really well in this if they just do social proof, but you can add it in if you've got other content you want to mix into that. Again, another clear CTA here is really important. As with all of these emails, give someone a goal. When you give them a singular goal, they're much more likely to do it than give them a multiple. So whether it's a button or whether it's linked text or whether it's some interactive element within your email, keep the focus on just that so that people are more drawn to take that action. And so what you can see in this email from Byte is a bunch of reviews. This email actually scrolls down further and has individual testimonials, but it's completely dedicated to this concept of social proof. Similar to the landing page, people will trust other people and other brands and other companies. And so when you can introduce that into someone's mind, it helps to sell the product for you. Again, they've got some really excellent company logos, really familiar ones like Cosmopolitan, for example, which really helps to sell it. And you can see shop now is the only call to action outside see more reviews. Again, when you go to that landing page, there's a very clear call to action to shop as well. So it's all leading to the same goal, and it's using social proof and user testimonials to really drive their point home. Email 4. So what's in your feature set? Again, depending on what industry and market you're in, you can do kind of a couple of different things here. If you're a product based, I usually would like to talk about feature set and how you can demonstrate value in that. Sometimes services, it works really well to kind of introduce empathy and highlight, again, similar to that second email, highlight where you can be the solution to the problem. But again, email 4 is all about continuing to build on that value that you can provide. And so this is from Todoist, and this is one of their sequences, and it's 40 ways to make your Todoist work harder so you don't have to. So immediately, now I don't have to do the work. Are you feeling overwhelmed? Here's 40 different integrations. It's introducing some of the product set and some of the product features that can help me, as it says, do more and stress less, which is ideal for a customer. And so the color blocks make it very clear what those are. And again, continues to build on value of, oh, I never knew I could do this. I can see the value in this. And then email 5. For this particular program, I'm only going to go into 5 emails. You can make this much, much longer, much, much shorter. And again, it'll completely depend on the time you have to put up front and how you iterate on that. But the last email or close to the end of your email sequence should really start to hone in on the sale and objective. As you've noticed, it's been mentioned in some of the other emails we've spoken about, but with this email, we're really singularly driving on that. We've continued to give value. We've educated the user on what we do. So now it's time to ask. And so this is from Peloton. And again, very, very singularly focused. You can see the Peloton, you know what it is, and it's asking you to try one out. So you can set up your trial of your demo of a Peloton bike by clicking through. It's singularly focused on that. You can see the call to action visually is very clear. It stands out from the rest of the email, which is kind of blacks and beiges and whites. And that is the goal of this email, is to try to get someone to click through on that link. And so that's how I would approach a lead nurturing sequence. Again, all of those points, you can distill them, you can use them in your own way. The format can change, but those are the basic goals of lead nurturing. You want to educate, you want to show that you're a solution to a problem, and then you want to ask after you continue to provide value. And that usually gets the best results. Other email campaigns, once you have that live, that you can look at are abandoned cart. So after someone gets the purchase page and doesn't finish it, make sure you follow up if you're collecting that email information. A newsletter, great to use, particularly even after someone's gotten that sequence. Continue to show what you're doing, more content, if there's new features being released, those types of things in a newsletter can really help keep you top of mind and make sure that if a lead isn't ready to purchase now, potentially in a couple of weeks or even a couple of months, they may be. And by sending something like a newsletter, you continue to stay top of mind and show yourself to be a leader in the space. Re-engagement campaigns. So if someone's taken action within your site and they haven't come back, nudging them to come back can increase your sales as well as increase or decrease your likelihood to have churn. So setting up something like if someone hasn't come back to the site in 3 weeks, send them an email that says something like, hey, we noticed you hadn't checked out our platform in a while. We've actually introduced this new course since you were last here. Maybe you should check it out. That type of thing can be really, really powerful to keep that newsletter or to keep that email list engaged. And then if your lead nurturing has worked and your engagement has worked and your abandoned cart has worked, you'll have hopefully some new purchasers. And so again, another great place, like we saw at the start of this, to continue to push them down that journey. Welcome them, introduce them, make them feel like it's something important. Make sure, obviously, you're sending those transactional emails, But also this is a great opportunity to introduce them to some of your features. Maybe you've a community, maybe you've got other product sets that might interest them. And that's where upsell in particular comes in. If I bought a nice pair of shoes, why not show me the bag that goes with it? Use it as an opportunity to continue to show your product set and what else they can get from it. And then lastly, special events and partnerships. Anything that's coming up. So if you're doing more webinars, just re-engage your list on that. If you're doing partnerships with certain companies, if there's flash sales, all of these types of things can be used within your email marketing strategy and all can help to lead toward those important conversion rates.